Welcome to BevCam's production of Conversations with the Candidates. I'm Marshall Handley, your host for this segment. Today we'll be talking to Jim Latter, who's a candidate for City Council for Ward 3. Welcome to the show, Jim.
Thanks, Marshall. Thanks for having me. I appreciate it.
Nice to see you. Let me ask you the first question.
Sure.
Why are you running for office?
I've always wanted to be involved in my community, whether it's coaching soccer, whether it's volunteering in schools, whether it's serving on a board for our local school, and that turning my kids' school into my school, turned into a run for school committee. Just being involved in the community, being able to help people, being able to make a difference. It's great to be involved in the city and the community.
Well, you're the incumbent councilor.
Yep.
And how long have you been sitting?
I've just finished my second term as city councilor, and prior to that I served 2 terms on the school committee. But it won't be an inside secret once I say it, but a lot of people think school committee is actually harder than city council, and sometimes when you're dealing with those budgets, it can be a little bit.
Okay. And what do you think?
I do think that when you deal with the education of people's children, it's a heartfelt issue, and when you have to do things that they don't necessarily agree with, it's very difficult dealing with them. City council, it's pothole, it's street light, there's some things that are contentious, but even the contentious issues, I think, fade over time, whereas school issues, people really take that to heart. People take educating their children seriously, as well they should.
Well, as a city councilor and as a candidate for city council, what do you think are the most pressing issues facing Beverly in the next few years?
I think that all of the issues that we're facing roll back to financial pressure issues. We need to do more work on our roads and streets and sidewalks. I know we put $500,000 extra into the budget last year. We hope to maintain that level for the first time, probably since Prop 2.5. We've been able to put as many resources into our streets so that our streets won't degrade in a year-over-year measuring basis. So it's nice that we're not falling further behind, but I'd like to do some things that will help us, in the long term, get caught up. We're about $25 million behind in getting all of our streets up to an acceptable level. I don't think we can get that in a year or even a decade, but I think if we can make a commitment to make them a little bit better after every year, hopefully after 15 or 20 years, we'll get to all these side streets that all of my colleagues, especially the ward councilors, we hear all the time people saying, I've lived here for 47 years and my street hasn't been paved and that street up there has, and where am I on the list?
Is there competition amongst the wards for
I will say
money?
that the city engineering department's done a pretty good job of taking politics out of it. They make data-driven decisions. They evaluate all of our every 100-yard section of roadway is evaluated every year or two, and that's all on a chart. You can get it on the city website. You can see exactly what the grading is of your section of whatever street. And it's actually pretty complicated what they have to go through, because they try to leverage utility work that's being done, and they don't want to put a lot of money into a street that they know has utility work coming up soon, so they try to get those utilities done. They come up with a plan at the beginning of every year, and they do try to allocate it out amongst the 6 wards. So they do a pretty good job.
What would be at the top of your agenda if you're elected or re-elected?
Again, I'm going to go back to financial issues. One of the things, and there was a story in the paper, I think just today, but it's something I've been talking about for 2 years, is unfunded pension and healthcare liability. And this is something that if we don't work with our state legislature and the community and really look at solving this problem now, while it's a big problem, I hope it's not insurmountable, between pension reform and adequately budgeting for this. It's a 30 or 40 year out problem, but one of the things I really hope to do is to keep this issue on the forefront and make sure that my colleagues on the council understand that even though it's not a big problem now or in this year's budget, if we want to leave this city in good shape for the next generation, it's something that we have to wrestle with.
Is that a problem that's a local problem, or is it statewide?
It's statewide. I think the article in the paper today, I just glanced through it. I didn't commit it to memory, but it's something like a $13 billion problem statewide. Beverly's problem, the unfunded pension liability, is about 79 out of 180, maybe it's 160 or $180 million total. But the unfunded healthcare liability is almost $250 million, and none of that is funded now. We're doing that pay as you go.
When you say $250 million, that's not Beverly.
That's Beverly, absolutely. Yeah. I mean, it's probably over 40 or 50 years. I mean, if you do the actuarial tables and how long people will live that are in the program, it's not the kind of number that's due today.
Okay.
But it is that big of a, it's like the big number you see when you refinance your house and you see what the total of all the payments is, and
Sure.
you sign that check and you're going, wait a minute,
Okay.
that's a real lot of money.
How much time do you feel is necessary to put into the job of city councilor?
I would say that on average, it's probably about 12 hours a week. You know, some weeks you might go through and have one meeting and maybe a public appearance and some constituent calls, and then, you know, during budget season, you're at meetings 3 nights a week, and you're dealing with constituencies that are worried about things in the budget. We just went through that, the Brimble Ave rezoning issue, and no matter what side of it you were on, it was a very intensive issue, and there was a lot of constituent outreach. I try to make sure I get back to everybody by phone or by email. And, you know, sometimes when people are passionate about issues, you can be it can take a fair amount of time to hear them out and let them know what you're thinking on issues. And when all of a sudden you get 10 or 12 or 15 phone calls on an issue, and each one of them's taken, you know, 15, 20 minutes to a half an hour, the hours can rack up pretty quick.
The 12 hours you're talking about, that's all in, or
That's on. I mean, I would say on average over the, but it's not 12 hours a week. Some weeks it's 5, and other weeks it's 20. It's an avocation, not a vocation. I don't pay my mortgage with it.
Okay. For people who aren't familiar with you, how would you describe your style?
You know, I am who I say I am, and you. Well, that's a tough question. What you see is what you get.
Yeah.
You know, I try to state my positions clearly. I try to let people know where I stand on issues. I try to listen to people and take into account what you know, what their issues with it, whatever the issue of the day is. But at the end of the day, I try to do what I think is the best decision as I see fit and move forward.
The City Council and the Mayor are responsible for making decisions for a roughly $105 million budget. What specific skills do you feel that you have that qualify you to participate in the budgeting process?
Well, for one, I did serve on the Finance Committee for the School Committee, which, although the city budget is $100+ million, the school budget is $50 million a year. And I did sit with line item authority in the school budget for 4 years. So that gave me an understanding of the process and munis and some executive understanding at a $50 million level. You know, in addition to that, I've had a lifelong experience in the private sector. I've dealt with budgets. I've dealt with business decisions in the private sector. You know, I try to bring some of that real world experience into my decision making in the council, and it works both ways. At my full-time job, sometimes I get to, you know, look at problems and understand things from an executive understanding that I wouldn't if I didn't have this experience in the city. Sure. So it works both ways. But I'd say the experience that I bring is, you know, just being a homeowner, a taxpayer, a parent in the community, having served in the school board, having dealt with large budgets there, having worked in business, having, you know, had to make decisions that meet deadlines and meet budgets. Those are, I think, what I bring.
Is there something of a learning curve there? Or is it?
I would say. Most assuredly. Yeah. I think there was a learning curve on the school committee, and there was a learning, you know, 4 years in, I feel like there's some things that you understand the big items pretty quickly, but some of the little items that we deal with in the budget and around it is a big organization, and it is a big city, and it takes a while of being not necessarily in office, but it takes it, because we have a lot of volunteer boards and commissions that get that level of expertise in their areas. I mean, there's folks on the Parks and Recs Commission that I'm sure can drill into Bruce Doig's budget, you know, much better than I can. But I think that the longer you're around, the more you understand these things.
Okay. We continuously hear the phrase fiscal responsibility. Candidates say it. The electorate speaks of it. What does that mean to you?
Well, I don't know who gave the quote, but it's one of my favorites. Discipline is giving up what you want now for what you want most.
I have to remember that one for my kids.
And I think that when you're looking at issues, we feel pressure all the time from all sorts of different constituencies, and sometimes you have to look at what you think are the important things, and be able to say no to some people, and they might be passionate about the issue. It's one of the reasons I supported the Brimble Ave rezoning. Is I think in the long term, if we can develop that land and grow our tax base, it will put the city in sounder financial shape at some point, as that project hopefully moves forward. And I know there's some folks up there that are passionately against it, and I understand that. But it would be easy to sit in a room and feel that pressure and go, oh, no, I'm against this.
Right.
But again, discipline is what I want most, is to have the city on sound financial footing for years to come, and that's why I don't make that decision lightly. But I just use that as an example of fiscal discipline is making sure you hold the line on spending and making sure you get the revenue where you can get it.
Well, the next question is about balancing the budget. What do you think are the most critical factors in balancing the budget? Where are the leverage points? Where's the wiggle room?
Well, and I learned this on the school committee, is you really look at your big ticket items. Healthcare is a huge one. Healthcare was growing at an astronomical rate. We got a lot, no, I say astronomical. It was growing much quicker than our revenue base was growing. And we were able to get some relief with some state legislation, and we passed legislation with the city that again, we had to push back on the public service and unions and say, you have to pay a higher percentage of your health care. And there was a constituency that, they said, we bargained that in good faith. Why should we have to do this? And it was, well, because the costs are going through the roof. I just use that as one example. Our capital costs, we've tried to hold our line on that. We've tried not to borrow more than we can afford. We've tried to line up our capital building projects so that as some debt's coming off the books, that's when we can start other projects. We're not trying to do too much at once. Those are the kind of big line items. The school's done a good job of living within the number that we can support through revenue growth. We started that when I was on the school committee. We closed a $2.5 million budget deficit, and there was a commitment made to, only grow our school budget as fast as the revenue the city could afford to give us would allow, so we wouldn't have to go through some of those difficult cut points again. So we've been fortunate there, but again, it's the big line items, and healthcare is probably one of the biggest ones.
Well, this may be a kind of a repeat question, but what do you see as the top 2 or 3 budget items, challenges in the next 2 years?
Well, hopefully we get the Chapter 90 money from the state. That will free up some money that we can put towards roads, because if we have to do all of the work on all of our roads and all of the increases on ourselves, that'll create budget pressure elsewhere.
Sure.
Again, holding the line on healthcare, I think is something that's important. And I know there's some pressure to, we run pretty lean on the city side. The fire department runs real lean, the police department. In a perfect world, we'd probably want to have more staffing in both of those, but with staffing comes money. Yeah. So, holding the line on those, and, those are 2 big parts of the city side budget as well. That said, we did just get some grant money that funded 4 new firefighter positions for, some time out, and I think those are positions that we hope to fund through grant. And, we're going to have a new police chief at some point here relatively soon. There may be differences in priority, so there may be different ways of looking at things that help us deliver services efficiently the way we. Of course, we want all the services we can get, but we only have so much money. So anything we can do to deliver service efficiently helps everybody.
You touched on the Brimble Avenue project briefly. What's your overall view on the need or potential for development in Beverly?
I addressed this. We have about $1 million a year in new growth that we count on. When I talked about living within anticipated revenue growth, we get 2.5% of an increase on
When you say $1 million in new growth, that's new tax revenues?
Correct.
Okay.
Tax revenues that we're able to raise because property values have increased because there's been improvements to the property.
Okay.
So if we had a $100 million budget and Prop 2.5 says we can only increase the levy 2.5% plus new growth, so we get $2.5 million from the increasing the tax levy, and then we could get another $1 million from our new growth. That's $3.5 million a year, and when healthcare costs are going up 11%, that $1 million makes all the difference in the world.
I see.
Since Prop 2.5, municipalities have been incentivized to encourage new growth, to help fund the services that we think are necessary. If we don't want new growth, then we either have to find other ways to derive revenue, or we need to cut services.
Okay.
So if we do need new growth, then the question is, where do we want it and or need it? About 12% of the city's property is zoned industrial commercial, and about 1/3 to 1/4 of that is that area up by the music theater on both sides of 128.
Sure.
So if we're going to have a budget and we're going to anticipate new growth to fund portions of that budget moving forward, as we have for the past 15 years between the Cummings Center and Cherry Hill, there have been other new growth projects that have been very beneficial to the city coffers. But if we're going to continue doing that and we're going to encourage new growth, I see no reason not to encourage it up in that area.
Okay. What are the issues in your mind that need to be considered when evaluating a development project or development in general?
One thing is the viability of the project. You don't want to put in all these resources anticipating new growth and okay, you've increased the infrastructure, and then nothing's going to happen with that. And I've talked with various people in the commercial real estate business in that area up off behind Brimble Ave. It's encouraging that new growth will go up there. Whether we'll get up to $400 million or not, I mean, that's a long-term proposal, and we'll see what the market bears on that.
Is that an area that can support new industrial commercial growth?
I think it can support enough to make it worth putting the investment into doing it. Whether we get to $400 or $500 million in new growth there, I'm not exactly sure.
Switching gears.
Who would have thought that the Cummings Center would be worth, what we have it assessed at? Well, Bill Cummings doesn't.
I think Bill Cummings.
I say that in jest. I think that's been a great circumstance for the city. I welcome them. They're in the middle of my ward. I don't want them to think that I'm...
in your mind, what are the real tourist possibilities in Beverly, or are there tourist possibilities in Beverly? And can we be a tourist destination like Salem, Newburyport, or Gloucester?
I don't know if we'll ever be Salem or Gloucester. I think those are two communities with a nationwide, and some would say, a worldwide tourist reach. Newburyport's not a bad comparison. I think we have a great downtown. I think we have a great nightlife dinner out community. I hope that the Cabot Cinema stays viable as an arts venue. I hope it stays a cinema. I think that drives some of that business. I think the music theater's doing great. If we remember what the community was like when the music theater wasn't thriving, when it was shut down for, what was it shut down for? A season, two seasons, a couple of seasons? I think that really hurt our downtown dining areas. I think that venue really helps us. I hope something happens on the waterfront here shortly. I know there's all sorts of conversations, and a lot of good people, while they might have differences of opinions, I think ultimately all of the stakeholders down there want to see better things happen with our waterfront.
Sure. What are your thoughts on the following development issues or projects? I mean, we've hammered on this one, but I'm going to throw it at you again. The Route 128 Brimble Avenue project. What do you see as the pros and the cons of the project?
Ultimately, I think that what they call Phase 2, which is the new overpass up there, That's what's really going to open that land up to some development. That's what's going to relieve some of the traffic problems on the street. It's funny, when I was sitting in the public hearing, one of the things that came to mind was people are upset with the traffic that's there, and they see this as, it's not that they're necessarily against development. They just see this as the straw that's breaking the camel's back.
Right.
I think that the root cause of a lot of people's, not everybody's, but many people's traffic concerns is the railroad crossing. And when I look at, what's my concern with that, and what has, people
This is the one down at Montserrat?
No, the other one, the one at North Beverly. Right
Okay,
now,
sure.
When that train stops, those gates stay down. And from what I understand, there's some fast signaling technology that will alleviate a lot of that stuff. I mean, that's the intersection that I think, people that are down off Dodges Street, they see the retail establishment that might be going in off Brimble Ave, and they say, my goodness, we can't handle the traffic that we have here now. It's not that they may or may not have a problem with the traffic that might be going in between Sawyer and Brimble Ave. It's that it's so bad now that even one more car is too many.
Yeah, well, that turn onto Dodge Street is a challenge.
I mean, the whole intersection is a challenge. I don't know if we can really do, from a traffic engineering point of view, what we need to do, because it is tight and there is a lot of private land there, and nobody has the money to either buy the land or take it by eminent domain, but there's got to be something we can do down there that makes it better.
Well, if you're elected, you're going to be involved in this project as it progresses. What have you learned from what's happened in the last few months?
I think that the word needs to get out to people in the area about what's going on. I think there was a lot of misinformation. I know I worked with the mayor's office and the folks at Northridge who were direct abutters.
Right.
I know that I talked with the mayor several times and the board of directors at Northridge several times. I knew that they were in constant communication about what was going on. I don't know if we realized that people were going to perceive impact as far away from this potential development as they were. I mean, 5 or 6 or 7 people from Nelson Avenue spoke. And when I looked at this, I'm rightfully focused on folks in my ward.
Yep.
And I'm especially talking to the folks at Northridge. But I don't know if all of us collectively understood how far out people were perceiving impact from this project.
Yeah, Nelson Avenue, that's off of Dodge Street?
That's down off Dodge
Yeah.
Street.
Yeah.
Yeah. And people spoke very, very eloquently. I just use that as an example because I remember sitting there at the hearing saying, trying to think in my mind, where's Nelson Avenue? And then my sister used to live on Morningside Drive, and I said, oh, that's right down there. And I was just somewhat curious is the wrong word. I was intrigued as to why folks who, in my thinking, weren't directly impacted by this project felt so passionately about it. And that's what led me to think about the North Beverly train station and that entire intersection down at the end of Budley. I mean, that's not my ward. That's not something I'm drilling into. So as this project matriculated through to us, I gave it a little bit more thought and a little bit more insight.
The McKay School, it's been standing empty for some time. Any thoughts?
You want to buy it?
The price is right.
Yeah, I mean, I'd love to see that facility repurposed. I'd like to. I think it makes sense to turn that into some kind of condo residences, the way we have with the Brown School or the Edwards School, or there's a couple of others that we've done that too. I know it's gone out to bid a few times. I know the current mayor feels that it's intrinsically worth more than the bids that we've gotten, and has thought it's been in the city's best interest to kind of mothball it and hold it until the real estate market turns around and maybe we can get a better offer for it. I mean, I'm at the point now where we've been paying insurance for it for 6, 8, 10 years now, and we haven't gotten anything, and there is a time value to money. If we'd have gotten the project off the books, maybe we wouldn't have gotten what we wanted for it, but we'd be getting increased revenue from it up to this point. I've talked to the mayor about it a couple of times. It's either out for proposal again or it will be shortly.
Okay.
I hope it sells this time.
Waterfront.
Waterfront.
What are your thoughts?
Ward 3 is the one ward in the city of Beverly that does not touch the water and does not touch the border of the city. So we're right in the middle of everybody else.
It's not your problem.
But I think it's everybody in Beverly's problem. You know, I was at a seminar at the library a couple of weeks ago where they were talking about the whole Bass River waterfront and what kind of rezoning might be appropriate for that to institute some appropriate waterfront and downtown growth. And an interesting thing was that people thought it was really important to keep some of that light industry down there, which is right down by my house, right down off Park Street, Clemency Park, some of those areas, because there's so little of that left in these downtown urban environments that it can make a very attractive incubator for some different kinds of businesses, because you can have a business that's, you know, not out in an industrial park up off 128 or over at Cherry Hill. You know, between the Cummings Center and that, we have an opportunity. We have access to the commuter rail. We have access to intellectual capital from, you know, all over the area, and you know that could end up being a really good thing for that downtown area.
Well, you know, on the Cummings Center, years ago there was a proposal for a new public safety facility.
Yep.
And we still have the same public safety facilities that we have had. What are your thoughts there?
You know, again, I'm going to go back to, you know, new growth and revenue growth. It's one of the reasons I felt so passionately about that. I think we need a new public safety facility. Part of me wanted to see that it keeps getting kicked down the road as we keep doing new educational facilities. Without a doubt, we need a new middle school, and I'm willing to go along with that because public safety's next. And with the kind of new growth that we hopefully get from these kinds of projects, we'll be able to do that sooner rather than later. I know that there's land at the Cummings Center that's available to the city. I believe it's for free as long as we build a public safety facility there.
We're almost out of time. I have one final question for you. What would you answer to viewers who ask, why should I vote for you? Why should I entrust the management of the city to you? You can use the last 2 minutes.
I've worked hard. This is my 6th election in a row on the ballot. I served for 4 years in the school committee, 4 years in the city council. I think I have an understanding of the pieces of government and the pieces of governance that help people out. I think I've had a solid track record on constituent services. I think I go into issues with an open mind. I try to hear from my constituents. My constituent service, I mean, I'm available 24/7. I talk to people all the time. We're in a downtown neighborhood. Sometimes, you know, we have businesses that are open till 12, 1 in the morning, and sometimes there's issues down there. I'm available to people 24/7. I've been out on the street in front of various establishments at 1:30 in the morning talking to restaurant and bar owners about noise issues and things like that. And there's just some institutional knowledge and some capital I bring. I work really hard at it. I enjoy it. I enjoy helping people. And, you know, I hope to continue doing it for 2 more years.
Well, terrific. That's about all the time we have. I'd like to thank our guest, Jim Latter, who's running for Ward 3 City Council. My name is Marshall Handley, and on behalf of BevCam, thank you very much for joining us.